for installing and getting started with iNav 4.1. This is a brief video that is just going over installing the iNav configurator on your computer, as well as getting it installed onto your flight controller. I'll be demonstrating on my MacBook and on a new Maytech H743 Wing V2. It is a really simple and straightforward process, so let's get started. First, let's go to the iNav GitHub repository. I'll leave a link in the description below. Next, we will scroll down until we see the releases for iNav 4.1, and we are going to select the file that corresponds to your computer's operating system. I'm using macOS, so I will click on that option. Once it's finished downloading, I'm going to click on it to open it up and expand the zip file. At this point, I like to change the name of the application file we just downloaded to match the version of iNav. It isn't super important, but it will help you identify which version configurator it is if you end up using iNav for a long amount of time. So let's go ahead and rename this to iNav Configurator 4.1. Something to take note on is that the configurators are typically not backwards compatible. For example, if you have a flight controller with an older version of iNav running, you won't be able to access the settings in a newer version of the iNav configurator. You can still update it from within the configurator, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. Once we have it renamed, let's go ahead and drag and drop it into the Applications folder. If you're on Windows, you can also put it anywhere that you aren't going to delete it. On Mac, you'll go into Applications, and we will scroll down till we see it on the list here, iNav Configurator 4.1. We're going to click Open. And we should get a prompt saying that iNav 4.1 is downloaded from the internet and would we like to open it. We are going to hit Open. Now that the configurator is open, one thing you'll want to do if you're on Windows is follow the hardware steps here, specifically downloading the latest drivers and Zadig to enter DFU mode for installing new firmwares. On Mac, we don't need those, so let's get started installing iNav onto our flight controller. Nowadays, boot buttons are pretty standard on flight controllers, so what you're going to want to do is press and hold the boot button while plugging in your flight controller into your computer. For me, and on most newer Maytech flight controllers, it is on a small breakout board. So I will plug it in now, and you see right here at the top, DFU shows up. This is the port selection, and typically it would show the port that we want to select for our flight controller, but now since we're in bootloader mode, it shows DFU. If you're having problems with getting your flight controller into bootloader mode, you may want to consult the manufacturer's guide on how to do it. Some are slightly different. So let's go to the Firmware Flasher tab. Now this is where we will select our target or our board. In my case, it is the Maytech H743. I will select iNav 4.1.0, and we will make sure that a full chip erase is selected. These settings typically you can leave alone, such as the no reboot sequence, the manual baud rate, and show unstable releases. Unless you have specific use cases, you really shouldn't have to touch those. So let's go ahead and click Load Firmware. This is going to load the firmware from online. We should see this screen pop up, and now we're going to hit Flash Firmware. Now the configurator is going to erase the current settings on the chip if there are any, and it's going to rewrite the clean install of iNav 4.1 onto this flight controller. During this time, you don't really want to touch your flight controller. Just let it be. It'll take a couple minutes or so for it to flash in some cases. And you have the progress bar at the bottom walking you through the whole way. Now it's beginning to flash. And again, just make sure you leave it plugged in the whole time. The configurator will let us know when it's done programming. Okay, we should see programming successful now, and we can unplug the board and plug it back in. You don't have to unplug it and plug it back in, but I like to just to double check that I've got a good connection there. And now we have the actual port that we are connected to on our computer showing in the ports tab instead of DFU. So we can go ahead and hit connect. Okay, you're now ready to start setting up your flight controller, which I will cover in a future video. If you have any other questions, please leave them in the comments below, and please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.